مرحبا وأهلا بكم في برنامج داخل واشنطن. معكم مضيفكم روبرت ساتلوف. في عالم الرياضة يعشق الأمريكيون المنافسات. في البيسبول ينافس ريد سوكس فريق اليانكيز، وفي كرة السلة ينافس سلتكس فريق ليكرز، وفي كرة القدم الأميركية ينافس ريدسكنز فريق كاوبويز. بالنسبة للكثيرين الطريقة السهلة للتفكير في الشؤون السياسية الأمريكية هي النظر إليها على أنها مباراة رياضية بين فريقي الديمقراطيين والجمهوريين الذين يتقاتلان لأجل الفوز. في هذا الجزء من الحقيقة، ولكنه ليس كل الحقيقة. في الواقع يقول عن حزبين السياسيين ليس فريقين، لكل منهما ملك واحد ومدرب واحد، كما إنهما ليسا متحدين لتحقيق هدف واحد، وإنما هما مجموعات مؤكدة من الشخصيات والمصالح والطموحات، كلها تحت سقف واحد. ولكن أحيانا لا يتسع المجال للجميع، وتكون المعارك داخل الحزبين بنفس القدر من الدموية والضراوة مثل المعارك بين الحزبين. هذا الأسبوع في برنامج داخل واشنطن سنناقش مسألة التنافس داخل كل حزب على الأفكار والزعامة مع اللجنة المكونة من الخبيرين السياسيين نورمان أورنستين وستيف كليمنز. Welcome back to Dakhel, Washington. I'm sitting with our panel of political experts. Today we're using a sports metaphor. People around the world often look at American politics and see two teams, the Democratic team and the Republican team. But today we're going to look at politics within each team. What is going on inside the Democrats and then inside the Republicans. Hello, gentlemen.
Hello, Rob.
So let's start with the Democrats. They've won 2 presidential elections in a row. They should be a united team. But what divides Democrats today?
Well, you know, our parties have traditionally had a kind of tug of war between an ideological wing of the party that's more interested in issues and a pragmatic wing that's aimed at winning elections. The Democrats have had less of an issue with this than Republicans, but they have those issues now, and it's a populist left which is dominated by two quite strong figures, Elizabeth Warren, the senator from Massachusetts, and Bernie Sanders, who's now contesting for the Democratic presidential nomination of Vermont. He's actually not a Democrat. He is a socialist, but he has joined with the Democrats and is seeking that nomination, and they are trying to turn the focus more first to the inequality and wealth gap in the country, focusing on bringing down large banks and finally getting justice from those financiers who got us into the financial mess, and arguing against the trade agreements, including especially the Trans-Pacific Partnership that have become a high priority for President Obama, but are opposed by a substantial share of the left wing of his party.
So are these serious divisions, Steve?
Well, I think they're very serious divisions. The only thing I would add to what Norm just said is that and to take your sports metaphor, but each party is essentially like a baseball franchise, a very powerful franchise that groups within try and hijack and control. And so while you have Elizabeth Warren right now and a movement around her who say they're not running for president, but nonetheless are trying to, define the soul and spirit and edge of the Democratic Party. There are other folks. What I was going to add is Martin O'Malley, a governor of Maryland, really wants us to mention him. He's sort of the Elizabeth Warren polite version that is going to run for president and is not being much discussed. But I think in that you've got the tensions in a very interesting case in where the anointed person is Hillary Clinton, and she will most likely be anointed. And now what everyone is trying to do is show how much muscle they're going to have that she's going to have to pay attention to down the road if she's going to keep the party cohesive.
I should add one other element here too, Rob. There's also a substantial division on the foreign policy front, and make it broadly defined. A very strong group, a large group within the Democratic Party, very upset about the failure to close Guantanamo, the use of drones, the mass surveillance, and also concerned that we're going to get more deeply involved with, as the phrase goes, boots on the ground eventually in the Middle East. That's a group of people who are suspicious of President Obama's policies on this front, unhappy with them, and his former Secretary of State, Hillary Clinton, who long supported a muscular foreign policy when she was in office, has to deal with that phenomenon as well.
So these divisions that we're talking about, impact of geography, age, race, are they divisions along these lines, or are they solely ideology?
Well, I think that race, age matter a lot, race more than age, but and gender, because we're going to have Hillary Clinton out there as most likely the leading candidate and the first woman candidate to run for this office. And so many women will, I think, be inspired. That will make that an automatic issue. But we also see candidates going to South Carolina and beginning to look at the Carolinas, and what the black vote did last time in some of these southern states made a huge difference in President Obama's run. The question is whether they will go with a Hillary Clinton or with some other candidate, or will they be more inspired there. So race, the black community, the Hispanic community are huge new parts of the political equation in this next election. I think age we always think will be a big issue, but fundamentally when you look at the kind of broad array of people that are throwing their hats in the ring, maybe with the exception of Marco Rubio, most of them look less inspiring to the younger millennial crowd that is just coming on to vote in their first elections than say they were there for Barack Obama.
You know, we shouldn't exaggerate the divisions here, at least to some degree. Hillary Clinton is broadly liked and supported within the Democratic Party, including from an awful lot of people who are significantly to her left. She is in a stronger position to win a nomination than we've seen in an open contest, especially when there's no vice president running, ever, I think. And one of the things that she's done, and it's been very interesting in the last few weeks especially, 8 years ago, race was a very significant divide. And you remember the acrimonious primaries involving Hillary Clinton and Barack Obama, where Bill Clinton raised the race issue, was very angry going into the South Carolina primary, as Steve mentioned. This time around, Hillary Clinton was just in South Carolina, and where a lot of people thought that she would get her distance from President Obama, she wrapped herself even more closely with Obama and said that she and the president had had their differences in the past, but they had marched in lockstep together. And now I think she's diffusing that issue because for her, going to the fall of 2016, the key is to get the same kind of drive, interest, excitement from the black community, younger voters, other minority groups that Obama had. If she does that, she's in an extraordinarily strong position to win the election, and right now she's on a pretty good path.
Well, but can I just raise one point of difference with Norm? It's a friendly point of difference. Is you mentioned the word excitement. When I watch Elizabeth Warren, who says she's not running, go out and speak, it looks like she's running a campaign stem winder. She's got applause lines, and she is. And I saw her speak in front of a lot of boring economists and had them nearly on their feet. This was a pretty bland, nonpartisan group of people who loved what she brought to the game. Hillary Clinton today looks boring. So one of the divisions, in comparison anyway, so one of the divisions may not be race, age, or socioeconomic status. It may be whether you're a boring candidate or one that really inspires. And right now, just my friendly difference is Hillary Clinton looks so manufactured, so sculpted, so preened, so risk-averse that she's looking boring to a lot of people.
Well, you just described Barack Obama among Democrats as being a unifying factor, created this unprecedented coalition that got out the vote, et cetera. Is Hillary Clinton that same sort of unifying factor? Is the debate between non-candidate Elizabeth Warren and candidate Hillary Clinton going to create these sorts of fissures on the ideological issues that are difficult for Hillary to overcome?
Well, I would agree with Steve that Hillary Clinton is not getting that level of personal excitement, the sense of charisma that Obama had, especially in 2008 and even in 2012. But she has a secret weapon here that unites Democrats and gets them excited. The Republicans, who continue to go after Obama in vicious terms, who are going after Clinton in the same way. It was in many ways an ironic secret weapon for Bill Clinton in his final couple of years in the White House, that the impeachment effort and the attacks on him united a Democratic Party that otherwise was to his left as he pursued centrist policies on things like crime and even on some of the other social issues. But because they went after him so significantly, people saw him as somebody they needed to rally behind. And I think the move of the Republicans to such an extreme level, all of the presidential candidates, practically speaking, moving off to a more radical right, and continuing their assaults on immigration, on the health care plan, on the president, will work to her advantage.
Ultimately, the question is, will the divisions within the Democratic Party be so great that a significant number don't show up, don't vote?
I'm going to a party that Huffington Post is going to be hosting with something called Bold Progressives, and just checking in and taking the temperature of this group. And my sense is that the Bold Progressives, that are largely a younger community, are organizing in a way to say that Hillary Clinton at this point does not represent their interests, that they look at Hillary Clinton as the corporate hugger, someone who hugs U.S. corporations more than she is thinking about working families and and engaging the trade debate. We'll see how this evolves, but right now there's a skepticism of Hillary Clinton in the left. Today, we had an article by John Delaney, a Democratic member of the U.S. House of Representatives, the only former CEO who is a member of Congress right now, and he has come out and said, let's not have the equivalent of the Tea Party in the Democratic Party, responding exactly to your point, that the divisions may be greater than we think, and he's making a kind of pro-trade, pro-friendly corporate thing that I think many on the left believe that Hillary Clinton represents, and that's why they're skeptical of her. We'll see how she does in bridging that gap, but I think it would be a mistake not to acknowledge that there is a significant gap.
Having said that, we had an article in the Washington Post a little while back, which was a kind of populist manifesto that Elizabeth Warren co-wrote. And if you look at most of the planks in that program, which included raising the minimum wage, making some changes in the tax system, almost everything there is something that Hillary Clinton will support pretty strongly. The gaps in policy between the left and the center in the Democratic Party are not really very great, and a few tweaks in rhetoric, and she's probably in a position where she can garner even more support. Of course, what Steve is talking about is a pretty small activist wing. Mm-hmm. The broad Democratic Party out there is quite enthusiastic about Clinton.
Okay, when we come back, we're going to switch to the other team, the Republicans, and see whether they have any hope for unifying themselves with such a broad field of candidates for 2016. In just a moment. My panelists include Steve Clemens. Steve is the Washington editor-at-large for The Atlantic and editor of Atlantic Live. Steve writes and speaks frequently about the D.C. political scene, foreign policy, and national security issues, as well as domestic and global economic policy challenges. To his right is Norm Ornstein. His newest book is It's Even Worse Than It Looks. No, this is not a memoir of Norm looking in the mirror. This is about the American constitutional system, how it collides with the new politics of extremism. So, gentlemen, the Republican Party, the Republican team, on the domestic front.
So much
Just
fun.
first on the domestic front, what divides Republican candidates? Steve.
Well, I think that one of the things that divides them, they may not yet fully said, is the new rights agenda in America. So when you look at essentially racial divisions and LGBT rights, you've got a number of people that
LGBT
have
rights for our audience.
lesbians, gays,
Bisexual,
and transsexual, yes. So the LGBT agenda, as we see it, the evolving rights agenda, the issues on same-sex marriage are ones in which the candidates have nuanced differences. But you have to remember that Karl Rove ran a values campaign years ago, and so it's interesting to watch a Bobby Jindal make the sort of Karl Rove ethic very much part of his core campaign versus what, say, someone like Rand Paul, who's more live and let live, this is not our game, states' rights, a sort of liberty agenda, if you will. So there are significant differences there. There are also significant differences, I think, on attitudes towards our immigrant population within the United States. That's a different question than new immigrants and migration in. It's what to do with migrants that are undocumented, that have lived here in many cases for decades.
So social issues, right. Immigration.
That's right.
Anything else?
What's so interesting at this point is that there are real divisions. The two that are most prominent are on education, where we have what's called the Common Core. This is something that emerged in the George Bush years, an attempt to raise standards for education in the country by creating a common set of standards across states, where they could then make comparisons and try to raise up those standards. It was enthusiastically supported by Republican governors and members of Congress 5 and 6 years ago. Then the more radical right, the Tea Party right, began to see it as part of a conspiracy to bring socialism to the country, to impose the federal government on education. And now what's happened is that the Republican presidential candidates, with the exception of Jeb Bush, are all stampeding over to oppose Common Core. Most recently, Chris Christie, the governor of New Jersey, who used to be an enthusiastic supporter, now saying, no, I hate it. Bobby Jindal, the governor of Louisiana, says it's part of this socialist plot. So what is a division doesn't show up on the presidential front, with one exception. And the same is true of immigration. On immigration, Marco Rubio basically brought together a broad bipartisan coalition in the Senate to do a comprehensive immigration plan in the early part of the Obama administration. It passed the Senate by a wide margin. Now Rubio has denounced his own bill, and basically, again, only Jeb Bush is standing, but not as firmly as he used to, on the front of we need to have something comprehensively on immigration. All the Republicans have moved in a very anti-immigration posture, which is we've got to secure the borders. So the divisions are not that great. And of course, we have another issue, which is taxes. What are we going to do to reduce deficits? Every Republican basically says we've got to cut taxes, even though our revenues are at a low when it compared with previous times. And it'll be interesting to see. 4 years ago, we had a Republican debate where the question that was asked was, what if you had a deal where you got 10 times the number of cuts in the budget for every dollar of tax increases? 100 times. Not a single Republican candidate would accept a deal that involved a $1 increase in taxes. And the same thing's happening now.
The other interesting item that I think has just emerged and it really surprised me is that Rick Santorum, who's just announced his election, has come out and identified, his first plank is really to address the needs of middle class, working class Americans, and has advocated raising the minimum wage, which is a shocker coming from Rick Santorum or any Republican candidate. So you're going to see divisions in which Santorum sees a deficit among the other candidates of looking at that class of people who've seen their life standards erode as a result of the economy. And Rick Santorum's come out not with a religious agenda, which is what many of us expected, but rather an economic agenda that sounds very Democrat. And so you have an interesting new economic divide that may emerge among some of the candidates.
So we've heard immigration, values, some economic issues, but generally not the same splits at all as among the Democrats. What about on foreign policy?
Well, foreign policy is significant in the sense that there's always a challenge when candidates are running as to how loyal they have to be to decisions taken under, you know, predecessors' watch, particularly other Republicans. So the Iraq War, whether it was a good war or a bad war, a just war or an unjust war, has become a dividing line.
We're almost out of time, so I have to ask for just one name answers here. Who is most likely to unite? Not necessarily to win, but who's the most unifying Republican candidate?
Right now, you're seeing at least some coalescence around Marco Rubio as representing a younger force, conservative, but not coming across as crazy. But this is the most wide open, unpredictable race that I have ever seen.
Not likely to win, but the guy who's the most unifying and interesting force is John Kasich.
Okay, gentlemen, we're going to have to leave it here for now, and we will come back, I'm sure, in the months ahead to take a look just at this same issue. Thank you very much for joining us on Dakhel, Washington.
Thank you.
Thank you.
بهذا نصل إلى نهاية هذه الحلقة من برنامج داخل واشنطن. إذا كانت لديكم أي استفسارات أو تعليقات حول هذه الحلقة، وخاصة حول الشؤون السياسية الحزبية في أمريكا، أرجو أن تراسلوني مباشرة على عنوان البريد الإلكتروني التالي insidewashington@alhurra.com. معكم روبرت ساتلوف. شكرا لكم وإلى اللقاء.